It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha, it's Feedback Friday, and I am back from Monday. I overdid it on Monday. Tuesday, I was just kind of like thud. Well, before Tuesday, I needed a couple extra days again, and then yesterday was Yom Kippur. But today, I am back. I have some boss fight updates with the Kickstarter fulfillment for the series, but I'm going to talk about that at the end. I want to get to the I'm going to touch on a few comments. I'm not going to do a big smorgasbord. I do want to say first and foremost, I'm really happy with the overall positivity. There were a few people who decided to be shitty, and I don't even really understand what they were even trying to say. There are a few people that just tend to comment because they hate feminism, and this adds nothing. And one of the things about getting really sick is that my threshold for negativity right now is at like -15. I need to reduce stress. I'm not going to engage with it anymore. It's just, I may actually start blocking people who are nothing but negative. It adds nothing. There's criticism that is useful. Even when it's not constructive, it's useful. And then there's people who just say the same shit in the same way over and over and over again. And what's the damn point, right? It's just a downer. I'm not saying I'm going to. I'm saying I'm considering it. But, well, let's do the Patreon thing before I get into the comments. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. The patrons are getting recently a bunch of questions about stuff that I will talk about at the end of this video. But I am going to be doing a lot of polling of patrons right now. So if you want to have your say about stuff, now's the time to get in. That's a fairly regular thing, but it's going to be fast and furious of late because, you know, we are in a transitional period in terms of content here. But the first thing I found strange was the people that fought me over strongman and powerlifting competitions and how those athletes look. I always find it strange when people get really vociferous coming at me about stuff like that, because those are the sorts of things that I don't open my mouth unless I'm sure. But nicely enough, an article dropped with an actual world champion powerlifter that backed me up. So I'm going to start there. This isn't a haha, I'm right, you're wrong. This is just let somebody who knows what they're talking about break the tie, right? The headline, I apologize, it's really stupid, but I won't even read it. But what they basically did for this article is they talked to 3-time British powerlifting champion Darren McCormick, holder of 2 world records. He is a man who, when his BMI was revealed, was described as an immobile mountain of uselessness near death. Okay. We asked Darren what he thought of the new portrayal of God of War Thor, and could he kick ass? Absolutely, says Darren. Like it or not, God of War's Thor is the peak of male performance. I love when people do this stuff. Why do I say that? He explained. As a strength athlete, there is a correlation between bulk and strength. Sound familiar? That's what I talked about in Monday's video. In powerlifting, the most competitive classes are under 100 kilograms. That's 220 pounds. And under 110 kilograms. That's like 240 pounds and change. The guy who are lifting multiple times their own body weight. These are big men. Then they do the stone, which in Britain, that's 16 stone, 18 stone. Okay, long story short, they won't be tall, they'll be bulky. The guys lifting the biggest weights will often be in the under 125 kilogram class, but not all these guys will have abs. Far from it. They have a layer of lard over it, a power belly. Any old fool can get abs. Yes, I am looking at you, Mr. Hemsworth, but a power belly and big traps, the muscles on either sides of your neck, are the sides of a bloody strongman. I admit I don't agree with him on that part. It is very difficult to look the way Chris Hemsworth does in those movies. The diets are brutal. But it's his opinion, not mine. This picture here is when Darren McCormick set his second world record. He weighed 133 kilograms and lifted 380 kilograms. 133 kilograms is around 300 pounds. And you'll notice he's sort of built an awful lot like Thor. Now, Thor is not as big as I think a lot of people think he is in this if you actually look at him. But I think the tattoos there's a bit of an optical illusion going on here. But yeah, he's added some bulk to the legs because of the armor. But yeah, he kind of looks like that. I still think there's some muscle atrophy going on here based on the slackness of his arms. I still think that's a character point. But this guy who has the world record by a man over 40, he says, I have a belly and it honestly helps me lift better when compared to when I was leaner and lifting in the 110s. If you're still not convinced, look at any recent World's Strongest Man lineup. Haha, World's Strongest Man, the thing I brought up, but people said, no, it's not the strongman, it's powerlifting. No, it's both. With notable exceptions, World's Strongest Man competitors are brick outhouses with power bellies, big ball guts that give them a good center of gravity. Look at this year's winner, Tom Stoltman, a dad bod to end all dad bods. He's the strongest man on the planet who excelled in both static events like the squat and dynamic events like the Atlas tones. He had to run in some events in World's Strongest Man. I don't run unless there's cake involved. His joke, not mine. Would you call Tom Stoltman fat? He asked. What about his brother Luke or anyone else in the World's Strongest Man lineup? These men are at the peak of physical condition. They have to be, and so is Thor. And I love articles like this because, not only does it point out that the people went after me kind of hard on this, like, guys, I know what I'm talking about when I weigh in on these things. I actually talk to people who do this stuff. One of the wonderful things about knowing a lot of different kinds of people is I can actually talk to people who do this stuff when I need to. But the other thing is, we talk a lot about women and body image, but clearly what actually is strong and what the media is passing off as strong aren't the same thing. And anybody who frequents bodybuilding competitions knows that I said this before, but I'll say it again, those physiques aren't designed for strength. Those guys, they're so dehydrated and artery, like vein blown that some of them pass out during the posing competitions. That's all for look. That is not for strength. And that is fine if we all recognize that. I don't have a problem with hard bodies in movies. But if we're going to be obsessed with realism in depictions of women, we have to be obsessed with realism in depictions of all people. And I'm not saying we have to be. Some people commented that they're glad that Project Eve got something of a pass. People didn't freak out about that. And I agree. I'm glad. Game looks gorgeous. Fine. There's a place for that. I think, to me, in a work of art, as long as there's consistency, right, in a game or anything like that, if everybody's equally ridiculous, if the men's physiques are ridiculous, if the women's physiques are ridiculous, no harm, no foul. It's everybody, right? We can't obsess over realistic portrayals of women and then give guys body image problems by not only making bodybuilders the epitome of male attractiveness. They're not, for a lot of us. I personally don't like that look. I not so much, not me. But, and that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. I'm just pointing out it's not to everybody's taste. If somebody was a super nice guy and they happen to look like that, would I go, ooh, gross? No, because they're a nice person. But personally, it is not my preference. And that is really important to say, I think. But that's not the debate with the God of War game. the God of War game, does it make sense? Is this the right design to go with? And this led to another comment that I found really compelling, from a commenter that called out the idea of representation and how you got to be careful with representation in games, right? What he said is, as a fat guy, his term, not mine, I don't have a problem with God of War's Thor. I do have a problem with all those on Twitter running around telling me it's meant to be some representation and I'm meant to see it as some kind of representation and or treating it as some weird thing that I don't see it as representation. And that was the point I was hooked, because I have been here so many times in terms of depictions of women as well. So Thor, if they're going full on with the myths, is quick to violence and lacks any idea of tact or guile, choosing to solve most problems with violence as his first resort. Thor in the God of War series so far is also kind of somewhat of a negligent father whose actions led to his sons being killed off. So to those on Twitter saying it's representation for me, thank you to them for implying I'm a violent thug who lacks tact and guile and will be a terrible father. This used to be my joke about depictions of redheads or anybody with sort of, an hourglass figure in media. I had this ongoing joke where every time one of them was like portrayed as this femme fatale turbo slut, I'd be like, maligned again. This idea that in media, if you've got boobs, you're a bad girl, and this should somehow be flattering. No, it's really not. Like, that's part of the reason some of us, like more for full-figured girls, curvier girls, we're more and more drifting over to, Japanese stuff where full-figured women are like mother or auntie or older sister type characters. We're not just, hey, she may fuck me. That's great representation, right? And it's not that there's anything wrong with sexy characters. It's like, can we have different types of look being sexy? Big boobs are not immediate sexy. There are different ways to be sexy, right? Look at Soul Calibur. Tira's basically the Harley Quinn of that series. She's pretty sexy in her own right. She's part of, the itty bitty titty committee. So I can really relate on the other side of this to this commenter. He goes on, it baffles me the lot who are all about offensive portrayals and negative tropes are looking at Thor and trying to present this as positive representations. Thor is a trope. He's the trope that the villain is the less conventionally attractive one who hasn't lived up to some set of society standards. In this case, he's no longer the in-shape male Adonis figure, and he's going to be the villain who gets defeated by Kratos, possibly aided by Tyr, both of whom would be more in line with conventional standards of attractiveness. It's like the whole trope in films of the villain having a facial disfigurement of some kind, which Twitter activists rallied against so much the British Film Institute will no longer fund any film whose villain has a facial disfigurement. I mean, Goldfinger in the James Bond films sort of follows this trope, as does it a probably more relevant example, Kingpin in Marvel. Well said. The attempts to justify the look kind of ignore a lot of other... Actually, before I go on, I do want to say, yes, I have issues with the fat, gross pervert guy movie trope. That gross dude that hits on the... And it's always bad guy is less conventionally attractive guy that hits on heroin. Hot guy hitting on heroin, that's okay. And yet it's not, right? Like unwanted attention that people don't quit when they're told to quit is unwanted attention. It doesn't matter how conventionally good looking or not someone is, it's unwanted attention, right? The idea that it's okay for guys to, either hit on women or compliment women, only if they're attractive, that's okay. That's not true, right? There are ways of paying honest compliments. There's a way of being flattering instead of pervy. And that pretty much applies to everybody. And I have heard from a lot of guys who talk about the fact that whether something's unwanted attention or not is based on just the perceived attractiveness of the guy doing it. And that's a very fair complaint. Standards of behavior should be consistent for everyone. And women don't like it when guys only go for the conventionally super hot chicks. If women are gonna act equally shallowly, right? So I do think that's why I liked what they did with, Beauty and the Beast, that they inverted that trope, that the gross sexually harassing misogynist was the square-jawed, like Gaston kind of good-looking dude. And then the Beast was the Beast, and he was the one you were rooting for. I like that part of the movie. Okay. So, and that was a film primarily aimed at girls, right? So there you go. The attempts to justify the look kind of ignore a lot of other aspects of Thor, mainly his favorite hobbies. And which are fighting and having sex, which, would probably work up a fair appetite. It's worth pointing out Dwayne Johnson, who, yes, is more bodybuilding than powerlifter, eats 7 meals a day, totaling over 5,400 calories. So I imagine Thor, whose day-to-day is helping people in questing and fighting, and his hobbies are fighting and sex, is basically working out when he's not feasting. Now, in the God of War series, Thor being fat would make sense because almost all the giants are slain, so he'd have far less fighting to do. Thank you! Still, this Thor seems more like Robert Baratheon after he's been king for years, so I'd have to imagine peak performance Thor would be more the Mountain from Game of Thrones. Good comparison to Robert Baratheon. See, this is all the same commenter, and he's thinking. And so he basically summarizes, I'm fed up of a lot of it being attempts to justify, to paraphrase, daddy thick Thor, it's some people's preference, and they want to see a character adheres to said preference in game, but are trying to come up with some justification for them liking it beyond their preference, which would be like Quentin Tarantino feeling the need to come up with some nonsense justification for the amount of shots of feet in his films. I love that. Also, people try to make Abby from Last of Us 2 be some kind of statement instead of, you just have a different ideal woman. She's no more realistic when you have to shave down her bicep so that her arm will actually bend than, the stuff people complain about. So I am on board with this comment. The freaking out about it is to do with a male character being seen as hot, but those who find Daddy Thor hot who are freaking out trying to find some justification for the look and their liking at it. And I agree with this too. This is why I don't think people should have to justify what they find attractive. Period. End of story. It's a real simple formula. Like what you like. You should have stuff that you like. We just need to make space for more than one of those preferences at a time. That's it. That's all we have to do. And the best way to do that is to create characters that make sense to their roles in the story, as opposed to getting into this stuff about representation. Because, I agree with this commenter. And so he summarizes, this is the same games industry that said Donut Drake was offensive. I never heard that term before, but I guess that's Uncharted 3 Nathan Drake. A fat version of Nathan Drake who does all the same things Nathan Drake can do. And I'm just baffled that fat villain Thor is being represented as being presented as some positive representation now. Yeah, fair. The annoying thing is that I'd not have spent the time thinking about this stuff and casting a more critical eye over the design if people hadn't been yelling about how it was so good and people should feel good about it, and so determined to go after people who didn't like it. I was in the I can take it or leave it, the design does nothing for me either way camp initially, and still am, but it's baffling to me to see the kind of groups on Twitter on about socio-political analysis of art and why art should adhere to certain principles because of sociopolitics basically failed to realize by their normal rules, fat Thor should be seen as awful to them. Well done. Good comment. Well done. See, this wasn't just an opinion. This was a well-reasoned, well-structured, well-thought-out opinion. This adds something. This is what moves the dialogue forward. This is what allows more space for more opinions so more of us can get what we want. I can get my less beefy monster people other people can get their Chris Hemsworth, right? We can have both. If everybody thought about issues as deeply as this guy who admitted he didn't give a shit either way at first, but then things pissed him off. If everybody just took a little bit of time to think about this stuff before they responded emotionally, everything would be better off. We'd have better product. Devs wouldn't be so damn stressed. There wouldn't constantly be fighting. We'd be able to talk about the things we enjoy. The great thing about this God of War Ragnarok video is it mostly positive and still did pretty well. Okay, yes, I pointed out a negative, but I used it to my advantage. But I love comments like this, and I like that the guy was willing to, speak from a place of his own identity, but do so thoughtfully. And this isn't, I have this identity, so you should do what I say. It's, here's this identity. This informs why I care about this. Here's why these other people are wrong. And I thought he made a very compelling case. So that's where I'm going to leave the feedback for now. So I'll wrap the Patreon. And after I do the Patreon, I'm going to come back and talk about the status of boss fight fulfillment and the new project I'm launching. Maybe I'll talk about that first. Okay, so if you like this stuff, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. So there are 3 things in the pipe right now. The boss fight game, finishing the boss fight video series Kickstarter fulfillment, and this Zoom call service as an affordable sort of like one-on-one, just have a conversation, kind of coaching type thing. So this is updates about all of that, where we're at right now. The patrons got asked about what kind of name they'd like for this. So I'm going to mull that over the weekend, and then we're just going to go with something, because I've got somebody who will build a website. I've got somebody who, for legal, like a lawyer in Canada who will look over things like waivers and liability and stuff like that. Because that's, I admit, something I'm concerned about. Less concerned now that I find that people on OnlyFans are essentially doing something similar over basically more sexy time. But yeah. But so that is going ahead. Hopefully I will be able to launch this sooner than later, because it seems like there's definitely a need for it. Obviously, that's another reason that I can't engage in negativity in the same way. If I'm going to jump into something like that, I have to be respectful of the people who are paying for a service, so they're not, caught up in drama somehow. That it's just a downer. It's a downer for everybody, right? So that is moving along. There has been progress on that. With the boss fight video fulfillment, this is a part I'm super duper excited about. As of today, everything will have gone out. The physical stuff, the t-shirts, the art prints, all that stuff, that's out. That's what I spent being sick with shingles doing, was getting that finished. I couldn't think, but I could stuff envelopes. So I did do a couple of size substitutions on the ladies' shirts because these fit super small. And they do shrink after one wash. I tested that before I sent it out, because I'm like, this is fitting pretty tight for a large. So yeah, there is some of that. But it's all out now. Depending on what part of the world you're in, it can take quite a few weeks to arrive. Unfortunately, some of the international destinations, they said 4 to 12 weeks. I'm hoping it's going to be more like 4, less like 12. But there you have it. In the US and Canada, you should get it faster. Should. I'm only saying that because if you don't get it in a few weeks and you're in an international destination, be a little bit, try to be a little bit patient. I don't mind if you just let me know that it's not there yet. But if you have not received your stuff after after a reasonable period of time, please feel free to email me. Make sure you give me your backer number, the tier you backed at, and then where you are in the world. Because that'll make it much easier for me to find out what is going on with your stuff. What's left is the custom videos, backers only episodes, and blooper reels. That's what I'm going to do next week. And then we're moving full into boss fight video game stuff. Now, we're already doing boss fight video game stuff, obviously. We are doing some narrative design, more art, area maps, really, really doing big picture stuff to make sure. One of the things we don't want to do in the game is build this snazzy level that's only used once. That drives me crazy. It's a waste of assets. We want every area to have multiple purposes because it takes a lot to build those maps, even when they're super simple. You have to lay down all those tiles and everything like that. So there will obviously be more updates as that goes along. But these two projects going forward are definitely where my head is at, is definitely where my enthusiasm is at right now. I am really less concerned with the angries of the moment. I think sometimes it is worthwhile to weighing in on the Thor thing, because I give an opinion and then other people have the ability to give their opinion and then they feel heard, and that's very positive. I just am going to be... There's got to be some sort of positive thing, not just this is my opinion. I'm going to be praising Caesar, not burying him, to invert a Shakespearean quote. Just because obviously the purpose of what I'm doing has taken on another level. And really sort of doing that mandate of, making things better for the people who are prepared to embrace better, willing to accept better, willing to believe that better is possible. I didn't do Twitch this week because I was too sick. I plan to go back to Twitch. Definitely when Far Cry 6 comes out. That's in a month, so that's not that far away. I don't know about before that. If something strikes my fancy or I feel like doing it just chatting, I will. It's all going to depend on energy and stress levels. I've still got... Unfortunately, after I did that Monday video, the nerve pain got worse for the shingles. It wasn't horrible. It was mostly bad at night, and so I wasn't sleeping great. But I'm baby stepping, just because getting this Kickstarter fulfillment done and getting people their stuff is very important. There's another thing I have to do for another crowdfund that have nothing to do with gaming that I need to finish. That was impacted by my move, and people are still waiting patiently for that. I guess it does have something to do with gaming, but anyway, people who know what that is know what that is. I want to do that too. That's another priority. And I think people will understand not wanting to just be the person the internet kicks for shits and giggles, right? I don't like getting threats over cartoons and video games. It's never going to be completely stopped because people are not rational about things. But if I can hit the sweet spot I did on this video with that kind of quality comment, I'm happy. That's where I want to be with this stuff. And so I think that this format of using a scandal to be really super positive on something, that may be where I'm going to stay for a while because it games the YouTube algorithm to an extent, but it also isn't just down in the muck with people who are never satisfied. So, okay, that's the update. I will keep you guys posted. Obviously, there will be another Kickstarter update next week as the video stuff gets pushed out. I do them here because some people don't check Kickstarter. But also just full disclosure, full accountability, open and honest, open book, right? So, thanks everybody. Have a great weekend. See you next week.